Hello and welcome back to the Marketing Chat Room. I'm Kayla Bryant here with Matthew Nanes today. Super excited to have him on the show. He is founder at Chapters Creative and narrative director at Jumpsuit, also two times award-winning copywriter. Welcome, Matthew.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thank you for joining today. So, today, Matthew and I are going to be chatting a lot about narrative, as his title suggests, and the power of brand storytelling in relation to narrative. So, to kick us off, Matthew, if you don't mind sharing a little bit of your background and just
Mhm.
your ideas on how narrative can shape brand values and just kind of shape a business overall.
Yeah, so I guess the origin story, if we're gonna talk about it as a narrative, so to speak. But yeah, I didn't when I grew up, I didn't really care about like marketing or business. That wasn't ever my goal. Like I kind of call myself an accidental marketer, business guy, but I guess it all started really early on. I mean, I was going to start with college, but I think as far as like the business aspect goes, it started with my time playing in punk and hardcore bands. When we first graduated college, I essentially was doing sales for my band, like booking us essentially. So like cold calling people, cold emailing people. And I didn't really realize what I was doing as far as like the sales marketing aspect until like well after like many years later. I had graduated from the University of Utah with an English degree. Thought I was just going to be an English teacher, like because that's what people assume you do
Yeah.
with an English degree. But I remember working at a warehouse, before I got my first like writing job, and kind of like recontextualizing business to what I was doing before. And I was like, oh, wait a second, like that's what I was doing. Maybe like I can bring some of my experience in that world into like the corporate world. And I ended up getting my first copywriting job at Overstock. But like the rubber didn't meet the road as far as like branding and brand narrative until I got a job at a spot called Expert Voice here in Salt Lake, where I had clients like Wrangler, Cliff Bar, Diamondback Bikes, just to name a few, where I was like, oh, wait a second, like we can write stories to like inspire people to advocate for a brand or help sell product. And I had carte blanche to do not like whatever I wanted, but like as long as I pitched it to the client and they approved it, like yeah, like we could do whatever you wanted. Um, and I just remember feeling empowered by that, and so like over the years, like after that job, unfortunately, I'd gotten laid off from the job. Like I was a math, I was a math equation, so to speak. Like who to lay off and who not to. But like when I discovered, the hero's journey as far as like Joseph Campbell's concerned, and also like how like Donald Miller, he does story brand. He essentially took what I learned in college and simplified it for marketers. And I was like, okay, like I can have a seat at the table in bringing these ideas, not just like using like story brand or whatever, but like fleshing it out even more, making it more of like an emotional thing, but also having that experience of like, no, this is I have done this before. I've run into this. And
Yeah.
so basically the last few years of being at Chapters Creative is just basically being empowered like to use those tactics to help brands like tell like a good true story and how they show up in the market and their products and through their campaigns and things like that. So like that's what I've been trying to do, and also trying to find new ways to be inspired by things that prompt good stories as well, like whether it's like Jungian archetypes or whatever else, just getting really deep with it, but also just really making it simple for people as well. So yeah, that's basically where I am right now, just helping folks tell their stories through narratives um and content, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's so awesome and a really important part of just branding and marketing in general. You run narrative workshops, and I know you've got a
Mhm.
story to tell about an aha moment you had during one of those. But talk to us a
Yeah.
little bit about what a narrative workshop is and what the goal of that would be.
Yeah, basically, it's spending a few hours with me. I know, time is very valuable, but like to me, like 3 hours to get like a solid story as far as like who you're talking to and how to position yourself as a guide versus just like I think it's very natural for people to like talk about themselves like in a look at us, we're so awesome, yada yada yada. Um, but basically what I do is through those 3 hours, like the first half, like I just basically ask a lot of questions about, for instance, if it's a founder, I get really like personal, like with my questions, like why do you even want to do this? What inspired you? Even going back to be like, can you connect the dots between like interests when you're a teenager or a little kid or whatever else like to what you do? So I just want to basically like connect them to like who they are so they're showing up authentically in their business, but then find like a way to recontextualize it, be like, okay, like these things are very important to you, like how can you help other people? And so making it a far more like emotional connection, right? So for that first hour and a half, I'm just asking those really deep questions, but then that second half, I'm putting them through like the hero's journey, where it's a very general message about the brand, but it puts in a nice little container because like for me, like the like I've used this to create landing pages. I've used this to create brand messaging. I've used this to create campaign creative, like like for ads or things like that. It just really depends on what the person like really needs at the moment. So if someone came up to me and was like, "Hey, like we need to develop some ads," it's like, "Okay, let's do this." Like, and we kind of recontextualize like, "Okay, here's the product. Here's how the products help someone." So that also kind of informs like the first half as well. So it's like less of a personal thing and I'm asking more about the product. So it just depends on what the need and what the ask is at that point. And like as far as the aha moment, like the first time I ever like tried this for myself, it was at my last 9 to 5 where I was working at like essentially like it was like a business incubator. They had like 12 different separate businesses under its wing, but I felt like no one could really explain what the incubator actually like was because it was a very like confusing thing for people to understand. Still, it's like still people don't really know what they do. I'm not gonna say name names or anything, but I sat down with the founder and I just found out like through my questions is like my experience of being in this company does not in any way equal out to what he thinks what the company is. And so
Hmm.
finding that like that friction, I was like, okay, like if I can help people like clarify, I'd be like, okay, you say it's this thing, but like everything you put out there in public is not that. It's
Yeah.
either you're misunderstanding what you do, being in your silo as a founder, or you need to adapt like what you're actually doing in real time instead, and maybe put to bed like what you think it is versus what the public thinks you're doing through the narratives that you're telling through social or whatever else. And so yeah, like that aha
Right.
moment was like, okay, like I have a lot of value to give in offering that clarity. Even like regardless from like a marketing point of view, but even just like from a personal point of view, from a founder's perspective, like because it's a really personal thing to go into business for yourself. And sometimes you need that mirror to make sure you not so much you know what you're talking about, but just is it true what you think you're talking about?
Right. Yeah, that's so interesting. And I work with a lot of brands on the agency and like paid media side of things and kind of run into a similar issue. Like everyone kind of thinks they know. Everyone has an idea, right, of what their brand is, whether it's the owner, the founder, the CEO, the marketing manager. Everyone has their own individual idea what they think the brand is and what they want the brand to be. Sometimes those two things don't align. And
Mm-hmm.
then the third thing would be kind of like what they're putting out there to the world and what the actual customers or patients or clients are experiencing
Yeah.
as they're the most important ones really to the brand. So yeah, I
Yeah.
could see how that workshop could be really, really helpful and important for a brand to really define who they even want to be and who they think they are in the market before moving into next steps.
Yeah. Because it's really about like the reputation, like I guess like if you put it this way, like uh, you can have like a deck, a brand strategy deck where you have like your messaging, like your visuals, yada yada yada. But like for me, like all of that should touch every single part of your business, right? Like what you, because I think what people use like is the brand messaging and brand visuals, like like the brand deck. It's like it's very like outward. It's like this is how we're going
Hmm.
to attract customers or yada yada yada, but they never use it as an opportunity to look inward.
Hmm.
So I'm always like, it's almost like a curse, right? Like I always filter all of my experiences as a customer through like this filter. And for instance, there's a car dealership here in Utah, and I think they have like dealerships in Nevada, and like they're spreading out. There may be even be a couple in like California where you are, where all of their ads are known as like we hear you. They have like puns, like listening to customers and things like that. And
Uh-huh.
so like I've been going to them for like decades at this point, like to service my cars, right? And so I remember the last time I called them, they were using AI to schedule, right? But I had a very, very specific question that I needed to talk to
Hmm.
someone. So for me, their usage of AI was not on the same level as where they think they are, what they portray out to the public, right? There was, again, friction there. Like, okay, like you're telling me you're going to hear me as a customer, but you don't even put another person at the other end of the phone anymore. So for me, that was like a huge misstep. It's like, so
Hmm.
maybe that part of the process, like of customer service, it's like they should have looked at like their brand values and things like that in their own narrative. Like, okay, how are we gonna do this when someone calls in? It's like, well, maybe you should invest 50K again,
Yeah.
because who knows where that person is now.
Right,
So that's
right.
just an example of like alignment, of like a narrative
Hmm.
that you're putting out there to what you're doing internally and your process. It needs to be a full fleshed out thing. I think so.
Yeah.
I think once brands like in CMOs and CEOs, like if they really internalize that thought, they could make clearer decisions, faster decisions. It might make, it might cost a little bit more, like in this case of this car business, to like, okay, let's have another customer service person there again. But like, I went on LinkedIn that same day and was like, this is bullcrap. So I
Yeah.
talked about it. I tagged them, because I think it's
Yeah.
important.
No, that's a really good point. And not to, not to call anyone out in a negative way, but just to that kind of reminder, like the brand messaging that you're putting out there really should align with the customer experience. And if it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't, then it doesn't feel right when you're part of that brand kind of universe and you're, experiencing it in your own ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult when it doesn't match your expectations.
Yeah, and if that was like my first time going there, like I probably would have been like, maybe this isn't the place for me, and I would have gone somewhere else. Like for me, it's
Yeah.
like it's institutional for me now. Like I said, I've been going there for decades. I'm like, I'll figure it out. Like I know people
Yeah.
there, that sort of like as far as like the typical people who like help me out. But yeah, but if it was my first time, probably would have called someone
Yeah.
else. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really important point for specifically service brands, I think, to keep in mind, or anyone really that's interfacing at any point with a potential customer or client or even a lead.
Yeah.
So, kind of on that note, let's dig into something we've talked about before, which is the importance of like empathy
Mm-hmm.
in generating messaging and coming up with a narrative and putting that out into the marketing world.
Yeah, because I think empathy and in the last few months, like this word has been demonized a little bit, from your Elons and things like that. But for me, like it has to take a massive amount of empathy to even like make good decisions. It's just in general, just in life, but because but like dealing with people, and I think the more you're seeing your customers, less is just like, oh, they're our customers. Like it's like no, like there are these are people with real problems, whether how big or small, and depending on how your business like interacts with their problems, right? Like you have to approach them with empathy, like to really listen in order to solve their problems. So whether that means like taking a customer review seriously, or like say if you have a brick and mortar, you're constantly interfacing with your customers. So like I think having that open door and incentivizing people to be heard out will really help you as far as like your narrative is concerned, because that way you know the exact problems you're trying to solve, and that's such a crux as far as like why do you even exist, you know? Because if you're not solving like people's actual real problems and encouraging them to share those, then it's just like, well, then what's the point? You're just there to do whatever you're going to do. You know, like, oh, well, we're just going to stay in business, you know? So I think it affects everything you do. Like one thing that I have a hard time with is when I'm asked for my own opinion as a customer, but there's nothing to alleviate my the opportunity for me to do that, right? So like, oh, like here's a 20% off coupon, or here's a 30% off. Like really, really incentivize those things in order to keep listening and to keep hearing. Because I think branding in general, it should change over time. Like messaging should change over time. Like unless like you're a heritage brand, like been around for 50, 60 years and people know you for like one thing, that's a little bit different. But like if you're just starting out, like my messaging is pretty different compared to where it started. Like my visuals are very different from where it started, and it's been influenced by like constantly talking to people and understanding the kind of people I do want to help in listening to them. So yeah, I think empathy is everything when you're showing up in the world, whether it's like whether you're a founder, a person, or a brand. It's like, yeah, make it easy to hear people and understand them so you can make better decisions, I think.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. Anytime I think that you can get data, so to speak, from your audience, whether it's, you know, anecdotal or kind of reviews, testimonials, feedback, super valuable in informing your brand voice. And if you have a team, a narrative team, marketing team, communications team that's open to taking that to heart, and especially all the way up to the founder or CEO, kind of considering that information and weaving it back into the strategy, I think you're right. That can be so powerful, because then you're really speaking to the needs of that target audience and not just kind of like, this is our brand because we say this is our brand and this is what we think people want, you know, without any real evidence for that.
Yeah, and I think and as far as like like as far as like putting in terms of like narrative or whatever, you know, like there's a reason why the Yoda works. There's a reason why, you know, Obi-Wan Kenobi works, or even like Hunger Games, like Haymitch or whatever. Like, because it's that person that like comes in and really like helps the main hero out. Like, so for instance, like just this past week, I did a workshop for a realty group, and I remember like going through it, kind of talking about the idea, like in the hero's journey, like the guide coming in, helping out the heroes. It's like, oh, like we sat through this one presentation last month, and this guy was like, you guys are all heroes. Like as far, like, kind of like that, like juxtaposition where it's like, you guys are doing the hard thing. It's like, as a realtor, like, are you doing the hard thing? Like, especially like where how house prices are right now and how, you know, the rates are and stuff like that. Like, no, you're the guide. You're not the hero. And so like, they're like, okay, I like the way you're putting it a lot more, because as far as the sacrifice is concerned, the amount of help people need, like, no, like the realtors are at this point, like, are not like the hero. I think like he was trying to like just like pump them up and like inspire them and things like that. But like, I think people are like, I do think that people are inherently, you know, see themselves as a hero of their own story. But when you're put in a position to actually help people, it's gratifying. So I think like twisting that like a little bit on its head, be like, no, you're put in a position to help people. And of course, like when it comes to like customer reviews, it's something like that 1 9 to 5 at Expert Voice, I had to like take note of, like really sifting through the reviews that actually gave something of note, like it like had some meat behind it, like had real concerns versus like the 1 star review, like someone just going off. Like you kind of have to like, there's even narratives in someone's like, if you look at enough reviews of a brand or a product or things like that, like if you look at enough reviews, there's a narrative that comes out of that. So
Yeah.
I think people have to like really take into consideration is like, okay, what's the one through line through the majority of these that we can actually listen to and then adjust, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really, really cool and a great point you made about like the hero and the guide. I think as as someone in a marketing agency, I think it's really easy for us or any brand, but just as an example, to fall into that trap of like we're good at this. We can help you do this. We're really great at XYZ, which is cool and awesome and true, but like that's not the story that we need to be telling. The story we need to be telling is, the client is the hero and we're just guiding them toward that success, right? I think just that small reframe can help brands a lot.
Yeah. And then also like making sure it's institutional knowledge internally as well. Because it was amazing in my experience, like even, you know, at that point that like, I'm gonna keep going back to this 9 to 5, like because it's really helped inform me quite a bit. But like even like the different narratives that people like from salesperson to salesperson were saying, like
Yeah.
people would adopt their own language behind like what the service was, or even like us as like a creative team would do, and I would find out in my own process of working with the brand, like, oh, like, sales guy told me this, or customer success person told me this, and and then I had to deal with it in my own way, be like, okay, the story is off, and I think especially in sales, where each individual person like has their own spin on it, like which I understand, like that makes sense from individual to individual, but like the foundation of what the real story is first and building upon that from a personal point of view, like I think that's fine, but sometimes even the foundational knowledge can be skewed from across like company to company. If like for instance, the last 9 to 5, like where I started doing the narrative, I guarantee you, if we had a company party and we brought our friends and family, and someone asked us, "What do?" You would have found like 100 different answers at
Yeah.
that point. Like in that. So like it makes me wonder what it's like now. But like there absolutely would have been a different answer for each person. So
For
the idea
sure.
is just
Yeah.
is to close that gap. And make sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, that internal communications and messaging is just as important to have, especially like you said, if there's a sales team involved. I work for a really small agency, so I think we're fairly clear. I could be wrong on
Yeah.
what our values are, but I've talked to a lot of large companies, corporations, organizations, and they all kind of have the same issue you're describing. Like, I think maybe even as it gets larger, it can become more of a challenge. But you'd
Yeah.
think like these giant companies, really well known, like they'd have great organized communication teams and all of that. But it's really something that everyone could use some support with.
Yeah. And and I and you see it play out like with large companies too. Like for instance, Duolingo was in some trouble, a few weeks ago, where the CEOs like pretty much like going all in on AI, with how they do things, or like, and I remember the blowback on that, where because they're very famous in the TikTok world because like their account is great, like they have like a very very engaged audience. But if you took a look at the week after they made that announcement, and people were so upset about that because like people, I mean, language is very personal, right? Like it's how we communicate. And so he comes out like and says like I forgot what the messaging was exactly, it's been a few weeks, but like, but essentially it's like, we're going to cut a lot of the humanness out of what we do. Yeah, if you take a look at those comment sections, like it's pretty brutal, and it felt like the
Yeah.
CEO was kind of like didn't quite get what made like Duolingo special to people, their most engaged audience, and also like Bumble. Like I called it the Bumble Fumble, where like I, I I think it specifically was. Oh, I remember what it is now. Where like because they're very targeted towards women in their messaging, right? But women were starting to see accounts that were blocked, not just like swiped, but blocked. And so women got upset about it, and their messaging to people who were upset about it was very like, oh, they said something like really like throwaway that was like really bad. It's like, oh, here's what they said. They said like, oh, just in case if you change your mind, but these were blocked accounts.
Oh,
So it's
well.
like, so if you go to their website and read all their fancy messaging and all that, but then like try to, equate it out to how they acted in real life, it was,
Yeah,
it wasn't in
that's
alignment.
a rough one. No,
It
no,
was
not at
the
all.
Bumble Fumble. Yeah. And it affects like my own, like, not to get like too personal here, but like I'm on Bumble. And so when I show up there, it's like, is that going to happen to me? Even though like I'm
Yeah.
not their like core audience, like, I'm not a woman, but like, but makes me empathize with everyone else that's on that.
Yeah,
So
it
what
doesn't
if
make
I
you feel
show
quite.
up?
Yeah, it doesn't make you feel quite like valued as a user
No.
of that app.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Interesting. I hadn't heard
Yeah.
about
Super
that one
interesting.
yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Take a look at it. It's pretty wild. They've been having some messaging narrative trouble for quite a while now. I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
once you start looking at things through that lens, it's just like you can see it like almost everywhere you go. It's like the sixth sense. Like I see dead people, but instead of that, it's like I see bad messaging.
Misaligned,
So
yeah.
yeah, I see misaligned messaging. So
That's funny. Nice. Well, somehow we're already running up on time here. But
yeah.
before we close, do you have any just closing thoughts or advice for brands kind of maybe struggling in this narrative space?
Yeah, I think like the first thought is like I think it's really easy to be in a state of like survival mode, like as a business sometimes, especially like right now. I might make you make certain decisions that make you save or make money, but may not be the actual right thing to do, especially like with how you perceive your brand to be or want it to be. Like I would just say resist that temptation and stay the course, because you never know what kind of long-term effects that could be in store for you. Like in terms of like making like one small step, like it could damage you for a while. So just like if customers are still showing up right now in 2025, like you just want to treat them like gold and like make sure like that whatever like brand values they have, brand promises, the stuff that makes people want to engage with you through your narrative and what you communicate. Yeah, just stay the course. Like it might be short-term pain, but like I think it'll all be worth it, because I don't think like all this like ideas of like the tariff stuff like or whatever else, like that's not going to last forever. So if you want a good long-term healthy business, just stay true to what you think you are, and people will see that. They will reward you. So don't get scared.
Yeah, absolutely. Words of wisdom, especially like you mentioned in this kind of economic situation that the world is in at the moment.
Yeah.
It's really important to stick to kind of what your audience expects of you, and when you have that audience, really, really treat them well.
Yep. 100%. Just make sure you're telling that true story and making sure everything you do is aligned with that, and you know at least you're acting in integrity in that way. I think.
Yeah, yeah, that's extremely valuable. Well, thank you, Matthew, again for joining today. This was an awesome conversation. Excited to get it out there for everyone to listen to. I will put some links in the show notes so you can connect with Matthew and view some of his resources. And thank you all for tuning in.